Hey everyone, this is Gary Kay, and I am joined with Sean Wargo again. He's the Senior Director of Market Intelligence for AVIXA. Sean, how are you?
Good, Gary. How you doing today?
Good. We decided after our last video cast that we are going to try to have some regularly scheduled video casts to kind of update the industry because in between and during when you release your market intelligence reports, which I find very interesting because there is no other company really tracking our industry the way that you do it. There are companies out there tracking product sales, but not the whole solution, right? Not every part of it. Obviously we know this is not going to be a great year. That's an understatement. But there are elements of the industry that are doing well, and we talked about that last time. Why don't you give me an update since the last time we talked?
Sure. We're planning, when we talked last, we had already released our July, what we call our IOTA brief, which is essentially just a snapshot on what we were seeing in the forecast. We were planning a release of updated version of that as we close out the year. So we've been starting to capture and collate the information. A couple things emerged from that, as you denoted. It is a rough year. I think on net, probably our forecast for how far down we were going to be in revenues as a total industry, let's call it -10, is probably about right. But what changes is the mix. And I think what you and I have talked about in the past is there are places in where there's innovation and opportunity that's persisting and perhaps accelerating. And then, of course, those that we just know are struggling to stay viable. And that would be, live events, any in-person kind of entertainment related project work, et cetera. But I think the area that we continue to see tremendous investment is, of course, in facilitating this virtualization, this remote work, this remote learning. So let's call it what we call conference and collaboration. Other people call it UCC, horse of a different color, pretty much the same types of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's an area where we do see continued investment and a bit better than what we originally forecasted. We're kind of analyzing now, well, is it another 2 points better or 3 points, 4 points? We were expecting this to be essentially a flat-ish category because the reality is in our industry, while companies are investing in facilitating remote work, they're not investing in office space and technologies for large auditoriums or conference rooms, that kind of stuff. So it is a replacement investment in some ways, an alternative investment. But we all are well aware of the success of Zoom and other like companies. And I think that points to this opportunity that continues to grow and emerge around this facilitation of collaboration. So I'd say that's the big theme for us. And I think that you were talking about that too. You're seeing innovation happening on the margins and new companies and new technologies coming in. And I think that's what we're starting to talk about. And even I was saying, as we look forward, I think we're being really, really conservative about growth rates because to me, we're in a time that is pushing massive innovation and adaptation, and that ends up yielding a lot of times really strong growth as you come out of these recessionary periods. So it makes me more optimistic, I think is the point.
There's a movement in UCC to go as a service, on all aspects of UCC. I mean, you've seen some of the major manufacturers out there introduce as a service packages where you're literally leasing the equipment from them, for lack of a better term. It's really not a true as a service model like we have in the IT industry. But do you see this as based on your data, do you see this as a risk for the integrator to get into the as a service side of things? Or have you looked at it to the level of figuring out what the right model is? Because I think if you look at this as just a lease, it's problematic. But when you look at it as a relationship building thing, I think it has more value. So I'm wondering, is there a way to track that, or is there a comfortable way to sort of support the industry with that?
I think the mode of tracking is still to be determined. I think how we figure out, we've continued to ask, of course, our managed service offerings, things that you present to the marketplace. We're seeing new versions of that, new ways of getting into it, like you're talking about. I would agree with you that for now, to me, even if this is just a baseline offering that gets your foot in the door, establishes the longevity, the recurring relationship, that's a win for the integrator. Because for sure, my guess is a lot of the technology, one of the topics that we've been hearing about in the industry is right now the investment is in technologies to just get the job done, even if it's
Right.
not, let's say, the best long-term,
Right.
most viable.
Especially in education. Especially in
Absolutely.
education. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So if you look at it that way, then there's a built-in potential upgrade path. And so the first versions then spawn other upgrade versions as we go down the road. So always some risk of commoditization. And I think that's what you're kind of pointing at perhaps, is you get into these leases and you're struggling as an integrator to figure out, well, what's my value add on top of it? How do I justify a few more points or whatever versus the competition who's willing to kind of take it at a thinner margin? So you have this sort of race for the bottom. That
Right.
would be the risk. But that's, if anything, that's just pushing companies to continually adapt, evolve their service offerings to be viable, to be competitive against kind of baseline option. And so, Monday morning quarterbacking it, literally, I guess, in this sense, since we're in Monday morning here. But thinking about how companies can work with this, it would seem that the option is you start with these, maybe this is tier 1, you look at what's a tier 2, tier 3, and so you have upgrade path. You think about how you can build in best practice around better technology options into the mix. So I'd say riffing on the core is the key in this situation, right? That's what it's been all about for our market right now, is how do you get creative about what you were doing before.
So another area that I talked about last time we talked was how digital signage is really kind of the ultimate untapped market for the AV industry. It's really the segment that like if you look at the data, somewhere between 15 and 20% of the signage installs and jobs have gone through the AV industry. The other 80% easily has gone way outside the industry. Everything from agency work, experiential agency work, to even traditional agency work. When you talk about menu, think about it, when you're Burger King, you're going to install thousands of screens. It's not like you're turning to an AV company to do that. You're going to your ad agency, because ultimately the content that's going to be on those screens is what's driving the application for the screen. So then the agency's going, and in some cases even forming their own company to do the integration of these things, or they're sort of contracting the kind of company that they would contract to install printers in the place as well, right? The ones that print the point of service or sales order in the back, the special orders in the back, the same companies installing these things. So that was one of the areas I sort of challenged, because I kind of look at this as part of the AV industry. It's just that I haven't realized there's another part of the AV industry that's available to them. But I also look at, why aren't we able to go after that segment of the industry, and how do we go after that segment of the industry? And then you come to these large experiential marketing projects, like what Mood Media does, for example, is I don't know if you know who they are, but or Unreal Engine. I don't know if you followed any of the stuff that Unreal Engine's done.
Oh yeah.
They're famous for the Star Wars ride at Disney, but they've done some pretty amazing experiential marketing projects. How do we bring those into the tracking mix? Because although those aren't being done by AV, you're not just tracking this on behalf of the AV integrator, you're tracking the industry, and all that is part of our industry. It's just that we're not getting that chunk yet. I think we will, but not yet.
Yeah, you point to a fundamental challenge with trying to frame up the AV industry and what it means and what it should include. I would say, and I think we talked about a little last time, the emphasis on our part of being as inclusive as we can around those types of activities, and not just representing what might have been the core and traditional AV provider who's doing, literal installs in, say, classroom or big meeting rooms in corporate. So you're right. We purposefully said the type of firm that we're going to be tracking, the type of opportunity is going to include some of the IT integration work, some of the brand shop agency type of work, because at its core, those solutions really are, let's call them AV, because they involve that last mile of conversion of digital to analog, so that we can engage with it as a consumer, as a user. So digital signage, I think, is an area where we have our hands are around it pretty well. I think the more challenging areas is where you're starting to see these blurring lines, even between, let's say, digital signage, security, life safety types of solutions, Checkpoint Charlie types of displays that are at the front of an office building or front of a whatever, insert here building, to do symptom checking and communication of guidelines when you're on-prem, those sorts of things. That's a little, more gray area. all the stuff that's happening in UCC that we're talking about, that's kind of not true core AV as we would have thought about it traditionally. It's kind of a little more IT based upon the systems and technology involved. So we try to draw a circle around it. And that's another one of these, it fits in this category of the innovation happening around the margin. That is it us, or is it related enough to us that we should start to be tracking it and therefore highlight it as an opportunity for integrators? So I agree 100% with the spirit of what you're saying, that there's stuff happening around this circle, however we draw it as an industry, as a methodologist for measuring the industry. There's stuff happening around the edges of that circle that we're not yet fully incorporating. And so make this an even bigger space. It's why every year I end up taking a hard look at our definitions and saying, you know what, we gotta start pulling this stuff in, because it's more related to what we're doing than we originally thought. Media servers are a great example of that. You know, technology that may sound IT at its core, but gosh, pretty much every AV solution these days has to involve some kind of server technology for distribution and storage.
It's interesting because there's these two companies called Epic. There's Epic Games, who owns Unreal Engine, is doing some pretty amazing, experiential things, right? If in fact, if you've looked online in the last 6 months, all these really cool LED, 3D LED display, they're all being driven by Unreal Engine for the most part products. And then you have Epic, the big healthcare company. Both of those are going to use a lot of signage in the future. Like, because what's happening is you have Epic, the healthcare company, that's now offering these virtual concierge products for emergency services, like urgent care places and hospital greeting areas, where the person is sitting in the back, but they're full screen on a 55-inch monitor that's mounted vertically. You walk up, instead of seeing a person, you're seeing a virtual person there, and you're checking yourself in. She's making sure you wash your hands, he or she, and is giving you the badge, right, when you check in, and telling you where to go. I say he or she because it's really virtual, right? I mean, it could have anyone back there. And in fact, one day it could be completely a robot, right? I mean, we're not too far away from that already with AI technology. But that's UCC and signage together, right? And those are two things being done by a giant healthcare company, which really is stuff that we could easily be doing. I've seen some companies like Diversified, and I think AVI Systems have offered some products that are sort of like offshoots of this. And even LG, I saw, has a division that they created to go after this segment of the market. But there's all these pockets out there that I really feel like, I almost feel like that Infocom as a show should highlight these applications like this, so that to get integrators to think outside the box, literally, because I think a lot of times we look at ourselves, integrators look at themselves as companies that go into rooms and install AV into rooms, and they're not looking outside the room at all the opportunities. And a big example I always used is the schools, like when higher education, especially the schools that are open, University of South Carolina is still open, North Carolina is closed, but so you have projectors in every classroom, but you also have the ability to put wayfinding everywhere, right? And why is that not projection? Why is that stickers? Because those stickers have to be replaced constantly. Why isn't that not, just other display technologies? And I think we get stuck on doing the rooms, that we're sitting there in the room, we own the client, we're doing all their classrooms at one time. Why don't we say, hey, by the way, in the hallway, why don't I put all the signage that you need to tell the students what's going on and how to get there? And of course, now in COVID world, for occupancy sensors and wayfinding, I think, are two big applications there. I guess my point is, I see this huge opportunity of growth, and I see the elements from the side coming into this industry, but not totally coming to the industry. And I feel like that we may be leaving a lot on the table.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's the challenge for us, is how do we go after some of that opportunity that's happening? One of the models that we're hearing come up a lot, which is an old one, but being recirculated, is this idea of hub and spoke. I think, as you've noted, integration tended to think of itself as a very isolated, say, user environment, a single case, and a meeting room, an auditorium, a stadium, etc. But the hub and spoke model would be, we're building many nodes off of a central core, ways of interacting. This is coming up a lot in hospitality, as we're hearing more and more travelers are spending the bulk of their time not actually in the property itself, in the kind of common areas or in the retail areas, but in the room. It's flipped on its head. So if that's the case, then the room becomes yet another node in this hub of interaction as somebody flows through a larger environment. So what I think the fundamental challenge for the integrator is not thinking of the hub as one little application area, but as the environment collective, right? So an office building in its entirety, a hotel property in its entirety, and the ways in which somebody flows through that space and interacts, and your ability as an integrator to help serve and facilitate engagement throughout, right? That yields tremendous opportunity for the integrator to go beyond simple project, more towards recurrence, as we're talking about, because that's almost an unending need for continual upgrade and kitting and improvement as you go through the life cycle of a client space. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's what it's about.
And it's interesting that you use that analogy, because I think our industry is still stuck on a funnel. So I don't know, have you ever read McKinsey's report of the consumer decision process mapping? Have you ever read that about how changing it from a funnel to a cycle, right? Where you have a loop, a loyalty loop inside there. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is where you're looking at it more holistically rather than beginning, middle, and an end. And instead of letting them drop out the funnel, keep the relationship so that when they have any application, they're calling on you. So yeah, you might just do the big sign on the outside today, but you could end up doing, like you said, we basically are capable of installing servers now. We're basically capable of installing and managing a lot of elements of the network, especially video on the network. We're better at video on the network than IT companies are. In fact, most time IT companies and IT departments are asking the AV people, what are the different options that are available for compression and things like that. This will be something for us to continue to go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think we have a better understanding of how content needs to be optimized to flow through that network, how to optimize the network and how to optimize the content. So from capture through production to distribution, AV specialization is going to help that. The IT company are going to be able to keep the data secure. They're going to be able to set up the architecture. But where the AV comes in, and as you noted, where brand shops come in, is thinking about the life cycle around the content itself. So the thing we were talking about even pre-COVID for integrator opportunity at video events was, gosh, you install these great displays, you help with project work, but have you thought about the recurring revenue around content to keep it fresh? So a brand shop's going to have advantage there of thinking, well, great, I have this. If I'm in a W hotel, I've got this nice flagship digital signage in my lobby, but I got to keep it fresh. Brand, they need an ability to kind of buy in or have some way of doing that. It's another place for an integrator to have creative partnerships to play and keep that relationship going. As you noted, I think getting back to one of the first things we're talking about, the funnel idea applies even to that concept of the leasing, the managed service, the basic provision of a simple. So if you think of that as the end, then that is the problem.
Yeah, because otherwise you become,
again, it's a mentality.
Yeah, and if you think of it as a cycle, then you become like an in-house AV company, as opposed to just being a vendor, right? You're the in-house AV company if you're out there supplying that from a services standpoint. And really, I think, we've been talking about this for many, many years. I just think that the market now has to force themselves to move that direction. The question is whether or not they have the infrastructure to do it. And I think I'm going to, certainly continue to challenge integrators to build the infrastructure to do it. And this is not just having a relationship with a leasing company or a bank. This is much deeper than that. This is really what advertising agencies have done for many, many years, is maintain the relationship with the client because of the quality of the work that they're doing. Same with the AV industry. We have to look at ourselves more like an agency, I think, and not just a vendor, but really supplying the quality that makes the client happy and excited and proud of what they have, rather than it just being, something they could buy off online. Because a lot of this stuff is capable of being purchased online. Let's be honest. The difference is, Amazon can't install it yet. Yet. All right. Well, look, Sean, thanks for
folks.
Thanks for joining me again, and I appreciate it. And we'll do these every once in a while. In fact, I might as well. I'll link the McKinsey Consumer Decision Process Mapping white paper. I guess I'd call it a white paper. White paper. It's about 12 years old, but the whole ad industry switched from a funnel to a cycle back when that was published. And I think our industry could benefit from looking at that, because I think when you were describing that, that's the first thing I thought of. Even though they may not see the relation, if they read it, they'll see the relation between the two. And of course, AVIXA is at avixa.org, AVIXA.org. And you just formed a partnership with DSF, so I guess that'll help you in tracking this digital signage market better, because I think you'll have access to the resources that DSF has. So I'm excited to see what that brings about as well. And of course, check out Sean at avixa.org. And Sean, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah. Happy to be here, Gary.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.